Gallery.
I'll do it. That's fine.
Okay, all right. So
Thank you, darling. That's good. Gallery.
Frozen?
Yeah, seems to be.
This time around, to look at the mind using Buddha's amazing view of the mind and how it works, which are the tools we need to use to, as Lama Zopa puts it so beautifully, to mold our mind. So we can mold our mind into any shape we want, he says. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to mold our mind finally into the shape of a person called a Buddha. We're trying to change our mind from neurotic, deluded, fearful, limited, low self-esteem, hopeless, angry, jealous, depressed, to wise, compassionate, content, fulfilled, self-confident, energetic, and enthusiastic. Who doesn't want that? So this is Buddha's methods for achieving that. That's the bottom line. Everything you do in Buddhism are tools to help you do that. It's important to know that's the point. So any tools we take from this, maybe use these, put them into practice so we can achieve this amazing result, step by baby step, one step at a time. I don't want to sing the prayer in Tibetan. That will do in English. That's our motivation. That's why we're here together.
It's 98 in the prayer book.
Oh, I see. We'll do it then. We'll sing it then. Okay. I wasn't going to sing it, but I'll sing it. Okay, that's fine. We'll sing it. So we'll see it in Tibetan. What it says in English, and I'll just say a few extra words on top of the words there. It says, until I'm enlightened, until I am Buddha, I'm going to rely upon the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And then it says, by the virtuous karmic seeds that I plant in my mind from listening to these teachings, may I become a Buddha to benefit all. That's what we're saying. Sangye Cherdang Soke Chongnam La Jancho Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Cherdang Soke Chongnam La Jancho Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. It's enough. Once English, twice Tibetan. That's enough. Okay. So our topic today is the anger is the response when attachment doesn't do what it wanted. Now, when I heard that just casually, one time from Lama Zopa, it kind of blew my mind. Suddenly, the Buddhist approach came into focus, So when we look at the Buddhist model of the mind, it's deceptively simple. When we're so used to thinking of psychology as a serious thing, we learn all about this and that and bipolar and PTSD and ADID and ODH and God knows what, and I am being sarcastic, all this way we describe mental problems in the West, very complex and all to do with the brain, very interesting, very fascinating, nothing wrong with it. But the Buddha's view in one sense is fundamentally, primordially different. But we can't hear it, When we hear Buddhism, you read the books and you hear about the three jewels and you hear about the three poisons and the afflictions. And it almost seems like, there's a special kind of Buddhist diseases, something kind of, I've got these afflictions. You go to your therapist and say, I've got an affliction. She'll laugh at you, go home, So we don't hear the Buddhist teachings properly. We hear it in this kind of Tibetan, Indian, ancient kind of way. We just repeat the words. So the fundamental, the crucial point, as we've been talking all the time, about the Buddhist approach to the mind is the first to take on board the idea that it's not your brain. This does not insult neuroscientists. It's not meant to sort of ignore them or insult them. That's why these marvelous talks between His Holiness and all the best brains of the West bring these different views together. So you could argue that, without insulting these neuroscientists, that what goes on in the brain is a physical indicator of what goes on in the mind. So the Buddha, the mind is not your brain. It's not physical. It is not the handiwork of mummy and daddy or a creator. It does not come from nowhere. It's a continuity of mental moments, and it's programmed with what we put in it. We come into this life programmed with our own tendencies. So we need to learn, therefore, those tendencies, because what Buddha has found, the neurotic tendencies, Buddha didn't speak Greek. He didn't use that term back then, neurotic. It's a nice word. The neurotic tendencies, the Buddha has found this amazing finding, unique to the Buddha. It's what he diverged from these genius Indians before him. He has found that all these poisons, as they refer to them, the unhappy states of mind, the neurotic states of mind. In Mahamudra, Lama Yeshe's book, I identified 21 different terms that Lama Yeshe kindly used in his efforts to communicate with us modern people. You know? He didn't use the word affliction, which is the typical word used in the Buddhist literature. So what are these afflictions? What are these poisons, these words that Buddhism uses? We know them intimately. Anger, jealousy, depression, anxiety, attachment, low self-esteem, arrogance. We know them intimately, but they seem too simple, don't they? When we think about mental illnesses, we don't describe these. We call PTSD and this and that, and schizophrenia and psychosis and all the Greek words. We don't just say, oh, I've got some problem with anger. It's not even considered a mental problem in our culture. I've got a problem with attachment. Oh, that's not a mental problem. That's being kind to your friends. So we don't have that view. They seem almost simple, you know? So we don't hear them properly. So we look up, we've been talking, the Four Noble Truths, Buddha's assessment of what suffering is, the causes of it, that you can get free of it and what to do to get free of it. He says effectively that attachment is the main cause of all the suffering on the planet and the universe. This is an absurd idea to us. We don't know what it means because we have such different views in the modern world. You know? We believe our parents are the problem, and our brain is the problem, and our genes are the problem, the DNA is the problem, and the Catholic nuns are the problem, and our boyfriend's the problem. So to hear that your own attachment is the problem seems silly, you know? So we can't hear it properly. So the Buddha's view, as I've been telling us repeatedly, we hear it repeatedly, we have to keep hearing it until the penny drops. We can divide the contents of our mind into three categories, precisely that, three categories. All the millions of thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious in the spectrum of all our inner experiences can be divided simply into three categories. It's almost absurdly simple, you know. Those that are neurotic, ridiculous, fearful, exaggerated, distorted, depressing, distressing, disturbing, and delusional. And they're called attachment, anger, depression, anxiety, jealousy. We know them intimately. Then you've got the next lot, which are our saving grace, love, intelligence, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness. We know these intimately. And the third lot, I like to call the mechanics of our mind. They're the parts that enable us to function. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need concentration. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need discrimination, you need concentration, good memory. These are like the mechanics of the mind, the part of your mind that enable you to do whatever you're doing properly, whether it's murdering or meditating. So we forget that lot. Our concern, the ones we have to look into and identify and unpack and unravel and deconstruct and change, sort out, are the first two lots. So effectively, the main cause of our suffering in day-to-day life and life after life are caused by the delusions. And then the second cause of our suffering are the actions we do on the basis of those, which is meaning karma. An action of killing based on anger, an action of stealing based on attachment, an action of shouting based on, you know, whatever it might be. There's an action of the body and speech driven by one of these neuroses. They're the two main causes of suffering, long-term and short-term. So if this is true, and Buddha says he's found methods to get rid of these, we should be very excited to want to, so we have to identify them. So these unhappy states of mind, you can summarize them. Buddha talks about this, there are three essential ones, three main ones. And on the face of it, it sounds fairly random selection of three, you know, but they're intimately connected, intimately, inextricably connected. And there's a hierarchical relationship between them. So the root affliction or delusion or disturbing emotion, as they call it, we discussed this yesterday, is this primordially deep, grasping. All the unhappy states of mind have this intense grasping character. This intense grasping at a wrong sense of self. So deeply instinctive, it seems like weird to hear it. This is the root one. Now, in daily life, effectively, the main voice of that one is attachment, to get what that fantasy I wants. And then the third one, anger, is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. That was the revelation when I heard that. And the more I think of this and the more I try to unpack this, the more a revelation it is. And actually, if we understood this, it would give us a profound basis for understanding our daily lives and why we suffer, and therefore why other people suffer. Namayoshi says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. You will never begin to understand it until you dig deep down into your mind and begin and start to practice it. It just takes time. The word's simple, but to identify it at the grossest levels and then ever more subtly, it's intense hard work. So like we talk, you know, attachment's multi-faceted. The most primordial energy of attachment, coming from countless lifetimes of practicing it, is this energy of dissatisfaction. Just, I don't have enough. No matter what we get, it's not enough. No matter what I do, it's not enough. No matter what I achieve, it's not enough. No matter how much you tell me you love me, it's not enough. It's this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. Deeply instinctive. You don't decide it. It's totally programmed. So why dissatisfaction is the first question. Why is that a symptom or a consequence of attachment? Because attachment, its heart job, the essential job it does, is it over-exaggerates the deliciousness of something. But all around that, it's other functions of this. I'm coming to it. The dissatisfaction, therefore, because you're dissatisfied, I haven't got enough. So there's this hankering, this emotional hunger for something, because it feels like it's missing. This is the next level of the attachment. And then all the time, this attachment is over-exaggerating the deliciousness, in this case, they say the cake. So there's dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, and then the thinking what's missing, and then you think of the cake, and then you're hankering after it, and then you have to control and to manipulate to get it. And all this is building up, and all the way through this, embedded in this attitude, is an attitude towards the cake that is a gross exaggeration of its deliciousness and a gross exaggeration of its function to make you happy. All this is instinctive from countless lifetimes of practicing it. And this massive expectation of this happiness that will come from it. So then because it's an exaggeration, I always use the example, it's like you've got a $50 note, but you are convinced it's 500. You believed it's 500 for so long. You're so excited. You anticipate getting 500's worth. You then go out and you spend it. And what will happen when you only get 50? You'll be bitterly disappointed. Well, Buddha says attachment's like that, and we've been practicing it for eons. And the next day you forget and you try to get to 500's worth again. So you're always exaggerating. You're exaggerating its value. And then the only consequence is that you'll be disappointed. And that disappointment is the dissatisfaction. So this life we get born with this dissatisfaction. And some people much more fierce than others. You know. This is the consequence of practicing attachment, of exaggerating the deliciousness and the potential of things and people and events and this and that can make us happy, all driven by this feeling of missing something. All that's the energy of attachment, and it's spontaneous. So it's what drives us underneath. It's a driving force. It's continuously there. spontaneously there, driving everything we think and do and say. Now, fortunately, our saving grace is that love and kindness and intelligence and patience and forgiveness and generosity, they're all there too, and they are our saving grace. The less of those and the more of this lot, the more insane we are, the more demented, the more self-centered, the more raging, the more suffering, and the more harmful. The more of these, the more they placate and calm down the neuroses, you know. So attachment is this constant yearning for something more. Even as the way Lama Zopa describes it, you're building up and getting the cake, and finally the point has come where it's going to go into the mouth. And even as you're having the first mouthful, which does trigger delicious feelings, which is what we want. It does trigger very happy feelings. But even as you're having the first mouthful, even the happy feelings come, still attachment is not satisfied. Even as the pleasure comes, automatically attachment is still not satisfied. So the second mouthful and the third mouthful and the second piece and the third piece, constantly hoping happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction will come. But what happens is eventually it turns into, we know this, aversion, because now the cake looks repulsive and attachment has disappeared and now only disgust is there. As an example of, so anger is the point here, but you wouldn't get angry with the cake. So anger is the volatile level of actually the main state of mind that is the consequence of attachment, not getting what it wants. Aversion is the main thing. So it too is multifaceted. So with the cake example, the more you try to get the happiness from the cake, and even as you get it, it's not enough, you want more, but even as you get more cake, the happiness gets less, and slowly the happy feelings turn into unhappy feelings. And now you look at the cake, what is in the mind? Aversion. It looks disgusting. This is our daily experience. This can be scientifically proven to be the experience of sentient beings. So aversion is actually the best word, is the response when attachment doesn't get what it thought it would get when it got the cake, when it got the event, when it got the boyfriend, when it got the money, when it got the job, when it got the right shaped nose and the right shaped chin and the right shaped breast. It's never, ever, ever, ever enough. This is the nightmare of attachment. So the only result of attachment, of pursuing the cake, the event, the new shaped breast, the new shaped chin, the new handbag, the new job, the only result will be some happy feelings, but it won't be enough. So we'll keep doing it, hoping more happy feelings will come. And the only thing that can happen eventually is aversion, disgust. The cake now looks repulsive. So we want to vomit. So we'll have a bellyache, we'll have acid reflux, we'll go to bed, and the next day you see the cake, you forget all about the aversion, all about the disgust, and we think it'll make me happy again. We've been bashing our heads against brick walls for eons, Buddha says. So how to understand that aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants or when it's thwarted. So this is a gradual process of a cake is a good example. In the beginning, the taste is very delicious. There's a delicious feeling, it's happiness. And so it is a feeling of happiness. A happy feeling is true, but it's not enough. So you have more cake. And that's still not enough. And you keep thinking another piece will do it. But in fact, what's happening is the happy feelings are going down, they're diminishing and getting less, and then they eventually become disgust. And now what's in the mind is aversion. So aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it thought it would get, when it gets the cake, the thing, the event, the job, the shape, the size, the smell, the taste. This is the grossest level of attachment. So aversion too is multifaceted. Attachment is dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, hankering, manipulating, controlling, getting and then possessing, anticipating and then getting and then possessing, especially when it comes to people and things. Possessiveness. All of that's a function of attachment. So now the aversion is also multifaceted, and the obvious, not with a cake example, but like with the boyfriend example, like the belief that the boyfriend's there to make you happy, the total expectation. Finally, I found happiness, we say. And so the cake, of course, the boyfriend is 10 million times more powerful than the cake. The expectations that the boyfriend will make you happy is far more powerful than the cake. Finally, I found happiness, we'll say. So the massive belief that that person, his job is to make you happy. His job is to do what your attachment wants. So inevitably, that's not going to happen, but it's not possible. Because even if he does say he loves you, the attachment, like with the cake, won't be enough. The pleasure won't be enough. You don't believe it. When you've got very strong dissatisfaction, even though when he says, I love you totally, you don't believe it. You distrust. So you want him to say it again. And you want him to say it again. And you still don't believe. This is the nightmare, of dissatisfaction. So the emotional hunger is there. And then the terrible disappointment when it doesn't get what he wants. So there's the volatile level of aversion is anger, shouting and yelling. So when you see people shouting and yelling, see people angry, that is the volatile response when their attachment didn't get what it wanted. Of course, the stronger the attachment, the stronger the expectation, the more shocking the anger. Then a mild, and this is what I want to get to now, because this is the part that we don't think about and don't do the analysis. We need to. Milder levels of aversion, milder levels are called irritation, upset, frustrated, annoyed. Everybody talks like that. And we don't think that's a problem at all. We just think it's normal daily life. I got annoyed today, I got frustrated, I'm upset. What do you think it is? It's a milder level of aversion because your attachment didn't get what it wanted. And it's happening 1,000 times a day. It happens 1,000 times a day. You stub your toe, the thing doesn't work, the red light, the cup breaks, the boyfriend doesn't listen properly, you don't get the right size coffee, you don't get the right temperature, tea. The thing you're attached to getting doesn't come, so you get upset, annoyed, irritated. We all say that. You don't go to your therapist, I got annoyed today. They tell you to shut up and go home until you get angry and then kill your husband, then you come back to me. So we don't think it's a problem. And this is the point about Buddhist psychology, it's fascinating. One way that the mind works is karma, a qualitative process of whatever you think and do and say. So seeds in the mind will produce certain kinds of experiences, happy or suffering. The other way the mind works is just bare bones. There's nothing we ever see, hear, taste, touch, smell, think about, ever since beginning this time that isn't stored in our memory. So everything builds up. So 13, 14, 15, 25, 30, 17 events, 70 events in the day when you got annoyed, upset, irritated, when this didn't work and that didn't work and that didn't fix and that didn't go well. And you don't deal with it, which we don't. Then it builds up. And then there's a straw that breaks the camel's back when your hubby comes home and you scream at him. And you wonder what the hell happened. What happened? Because you haven't been dealing with the mini events of mental breakdowns throughout the day because we don't think they're important, because we don't notice. This is why we all go crazy. Then the internalized, most internal level of aversion is depression. It's a build-up of countless moments throughout your life of attachment and feeling not getting enough, not being satisfied, not getting enough, not being satisfied, not getting enough, not being satisfied. It builds up, it builds up, it builds up, and until eventually you're inert in bed and can't get out of bed. And then our trouble is, as I've been talking, our tragedy is we only notice it when it's severe. We only notice we have aversion when you want to kill your husband. That's when we think we should do something about it, but it's way too late. So the real skill we can learn from Buddhism. Forget about nirvana, forget about enlightenment. The brilliant skill that he's teaching us is that we can develop skills to pay attention to what the hell is going on in between our ears, moment by moment by moment, which is highly developed ability, because we 99% of the time are paying attention only to the outside world. We only notice what's happening in here when it's screaming. And that's when it's too late. So we have to reverse that process. You have to develop the skill to pay attention to what's happening in here moment by moment, which is really sophisticated. It takes a long time to get to that because we're mostly on autopilot. We only notice what's happening in here is when the body feels it, when the body's involved, which is the tip of the iceberg, and it's way too late. So basically, of all the thousands of delusions Buddha talks about, all these neurotic states of mind, attachment and aversion are absolutely fundamental to all the others. And everybody in the universe, your dog, your cat, the mice, the pedophile, whoever, is driven by these. So we have to become intimately familiar with our own mind. This is the job of being a Buddhist, being your own therapist, as Rami puts it. And this is what's shocking when we point it out. When we talk about our minds and our suffering and our misery in our lives, we absolutely bring into the center of our experiences the people and the events and the things that happened, because we consider that they are the cause of what I'm feeling. This is the major radical difference between the Buddha and the modern psychological models. Now, Buddha's not saying the boyfriend doesn't play a role. It's evident when he punches you in the nose that he's playing a major role. But our problem is when we do an analysis of the main cause of my anger, for example, anger might be my response, let's say, we would say the boyfriend is the main cause of the anger. So this is like technical, but the Buddha's literally saying it's a mistake. He's not being fundamentalist. He just says you haven't analyzed it properly. This is the part that's shocking. And we're very, very entrenched in that view. And it's just the same with happiness. As far as I'm concerned, my boyfriend is the main cause of why I'm happy. There's the proof. He loves me, he's kind to me, he gives me things, he supports me. There's all the proof for us. And that's absolute truth for us. That's the basis, that's how we think in the world. This is the major problem that prevents us from hearing what Buddha's saying. He's not saying that the boyfriend's kindness doesn't play a role. And he's not saying the boyfriend's meanness doesn't play a role. He's not saying that. He just says it's not the main cause. This is the part that's shocking for us. Hard to hear. He is saying the main cause, there's the Four Noble Truths, now the second one, the causes, the main cause of that moment of suffering, one, due to a karmic connection with that person, because you can't meet a person randomly. Karma is a natural law that runs the universe. It can't be on a random event, already a shock to us. This person, even the stranger who punches you in the nose, is a karmic connection. So the first main cause of this suffering is my past action of punching. Or the first cause of my present happiness. Better example, the first cause of my present moment of happiness is my past generous action from 27 lives ago to this particular person. That's how Buddha analyzes it. But of course, it's so abstract for us. It's a joke, we can't just, karma, big deal, That's the first cause. But the second cause and the main one, the two subsumed to this one, is the virtue in my mind at the time I did it. They're the two main causes of this moment of happiness. Equally, the two main causes of my suffering at this moment, past karma and the delusion that informed it. So, of course, as a Buddhist, then, the analysis you're doing is this one. So you sort of like, there's the boyfriend. That's his problem. Get out of his way. Leave the idiot if you have to. Now let's look at my problem. This is too hard. Our analysis is profoundly different. And don't blame Jung or Freud or your mother for this view. It's the view of ego. We all think this. Animals and monkeys think it too. It's spontaneous. It's primordially deep inside us to blame the external. And that's where attachment and anger come in. Talking at a more subtle level about attachment and anger, they're viewpoints. They're like philosophies in your mind. So attachment is an assumption, a deep primordial assumption that I only should ever get nice things. Not just that I want nice things, but there's this hubris about attachment. I only deserve nice things. That's attachment's assumption. And anger's assumption, listen to it. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. So this is where I comes in. The root delusion I is underpinning both of these assumptions. The assumption of an intrinsic I in the first place is what even gives rise to these two assumptions. I only deserve good things and I do not deserve bad. So this is why we suffer. These assumptions. This is why we suffer. The 3 poisons. That's it. It's not complicated, but it's too shocking to hear it. And Buddha says we can fix it. Get rid of these assumptions, get rid of these illusions, and then never we can only ever get happy. That's what he's saying. It's so simple, so encouraging. This is way to go to hear this, to see this part, to see this level of assumption is too hard, it's too difficult, it's too subtle. So this attachment, this assumption, I must get only the nice things. Attachment is like a junkie in this. It's so fragile, it's so desperate, it's so fragile. It can't bear getting anything that isn't what I want. Therefore, it's utterly and completely self-centered. And don't hear it as criticism. It's like a technical explanation. It's necessarily totally I-based. And it's very fragile. And the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants, we have the panic attack of anger, annoyed, upset, frustrated, depressed, depending on your personality. So attachment can only handle nice things. So as we build up these moments of attachment being thwarted and not getting the nice things, we get annoyed, upset, angry, distressed, and it builds up and builds up. But then look at and even the extreme examples of intense bad things happening to us, because bad things do happen. Look at the world. Terrible things happen to human beings, forget animals. Terrible things happen to people. Murdered, raped, attacked, abused, insulted, harmed. Look at the world. These things happen. So of course we believe I'm suffering because, my father beat me up, let's say, for example. Or even 10 times worse things. You're abused as a child, which is so common.
So she's frozen forever. Is the screen black for everybody? Yep.
Yeah, it's disappeared, I think.
Yes, me too.
Now she's back.
We lost you, Venerable Robina, but I think you're back. Yeah. Thank you.
Sweetie Patty.
Yes. You are frozen again. If someone can help you put your view back to gallery.
It is, darling. It's back to gallery.
Wonderful, wonderful.
But can you hear me, people?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Thumbs up. Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. So, what we call these days, we say, we've got trauma. We have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, isn't it? Okay. What that is, you see, when something goes wrong, attachment, let's say, doesn't get what it wants, and then aversion arises. But let's say you deal with it. Let's say you deal with it. There's a really crucial point. Let's say you deal with it and you accept it. You have just solved your problem. That won't carry on as kind of a build-up of aversion. So some people, when they have suffering, even as children, are able to deal with it. So they will never have what's called PTSD because you're not suppressing everything. When the suffering is so bad, in other words, attachment is so thwarted, and a shocking thing happens, you get abused as a child, let's say, and you're not equipped mentally to deal with it, but you've got lots of attachment, so you're shattered naturally when it happens. So have incredible aversion, and then it'll manifest as panic, and then for you, it'll bury down deep because you simply can't bear it. Bad things happening sometimes are literally so unbearable, we can't handle them. That's when we build them up and they become just PTSD. Are we communicating here? It's a build-up. Now, if you do, I was telling Jackie one example I had, one experience, I mentioned this in the past, I think. It just happened to be in my life when I got held up with a gun. And I basically told the guy off. Do you understand? So it just happened to be my personality. So I'm a bossy.
I think we lost her again.
Okay, clear? Take it off, turn it off. Just turn out the volume. Okay, people? Clear? Good. So did you hear my example? Did you hear the example? Why was I not traumatized? Because there was no fear. Because whatever reason, this bossy person in me came out and I bossed this guy around and I became the boss. Therefore, there was no fear and the anger dissipated and I took control of it and he left and it was my party story. There was not a skerrick, as we say in Australia. It was not a moment of fear, not a moment of, so I realized even then when there's no fear, there's no suffering. So fear, what you've got to understand this too, this is very curious. They don't talk about this much in the texts. When we think of delusions, we add fear to the mix, with anger and jealousy and fear. But fear is the symptom of all of them because they're all rooted in the primordial belief in an I that doesn't exist, which is rooted in fear because it's a misconception. So attachment and anger and jealousy are all rooted in fear. We just don't analyze it like that. Well, the more you see that, the more it makes sense. So that one example, for whatever reason, my personality, the anger turned into sort of like whatever happened and I became in control of it and this guy walked away. So there was no fear and therefore there was no suffering. Therefore there was no PTSD, no trauma because I was, for whatever reason, I dealt with it at that moment. Are you hearing me, people? So if we can start by dealing with the baby events, don't wait till you're held up by a gun. Don't wait till your husband leaves you. Deal with when you break the cup. Like I always joke and say, I've never yet met a person who, when they break a cup doing the dishes, doesn't get upset. You understand what I'm saying? Upset is anger because your attachment just didn't get what it wanted because attachment wants everything to be perfect. These baby moments, which we totally ignore, it's the build-up of those that become stress and anxiety and eventually what we call trauma and PTSD and everything else. I mean, it might sound a really simplistic analysis. Maybe psychologists will think I'm being pathetic. I'm using the Buddhist analysis to describe our minds, Are we communicating, people? So the key is to be aware of what's going on. And then when you get annoyed, you catch it. Because otherwise it'll just build up. Come on, Robina, relax. It's only a cup, darling. Break another cup. It's all right. You fix it. You just counteract the anger and you make it okay. And I'm really sincerely meaning this. That's practice. Every single moment you're dealing with what's there and you work with it. The attachment arises, you feel it, because it's too subtle to notice it until it's rising up. Then the annoyance happens. Work on it. It's okay. It's only a red light, Robina. It's okay. He didn't mean it. It's okay. Let go of it. Then you deal with it. You deal with it. You deal with it. You deal with it. So there's nothing to build up. This is why I again use this example of my friend in prison, Sunny. 17 years. 12 years in death row, 5 more years till they let her out. Like living hell. Accused of killing 2 policemen along with her husband. She gave her children to her family, and then her parents got killed in a car accident. She lost her kids. They were totally innocent. On death row in Florida. She lived for years in a cell on her own, isolated. Husband eventually got executed. She was at the execution. His head burst into flames. I mean, you can't imagine one nightmare after another, right? Now, talk about PTSD, talk about trauma. You understand me? She was unbelievable. She's not a Buddhist. She's out now. She lives in Ireland. She said, I knew I had a choice to change her mind, not to go completely crazy, which is what we think is reasonable, out of her brain. At the same time, I read about some fellow on death row, also innocent, who was what we would call normal, who went completely out of his brain, went insane, screaming daily, I did not rape and kill that woman. So of course we understand that response. But in our view, that's the only response, and you got no choice. She said, I knew I had a choice. She said, finally, at some point, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. I decided, I am not a prisoner. I am a monk. I am not in a cell. I'm in a cave. Now, I mean, she's not a Buddhist. I mean, she's straight out of the Lama Zopa's workbook, you know, quoting Lama Zopa. So the point is, what's the point of this? What's the consequence of that? She kept her sanity. She stayed compassionate, wise, clear. She wasn't traumatized. She didn't get PTSD. She did not go mad because she knew she could change her mind. And what that means is she can change the way she interpreted her experience. That's exactly what Buddha's telling us. She didn't get it from Buddhism. She must have had it from past life. She doesn't think about karma or anything like that. This is practice. And Buddha doesn't own this. He's just an expert at it, that's all. But it's the hardest job we'll ever do because we run to the other one. We run to the blame. It's not my fault. I can't help it. And life is bad. This is not saying you're a bad person. It just shows how difficult it is. But this is Buddhist practice. And who's the beneficiary? We are. It's not moralistic. It's not not just being a good girl. This is the method to not go mad. This is the method to navigate your life, deal with your suffering, deal with your problems, reinterpret them, and become happy. And attachment and aversion are the fundamentals beneath all of them. Primordially deep states of mind. We're running 1,000 times between them. That's why we have to some concentration meditation. We might not get concentration in this life. Don't hold your breath. But at least we practice something every day, training ourselves to focus. We bring that to bear as soon as we get off our cushion. And then instead of merely only noticing the traffic and only noticing what your children are doing and then wanting to kill them when things go wrong, you're also paying attention to the workings of your own mind, all these conceptual stories raging on. This is practice, people. We can mold our mind into any shape we like. And attachment or aversion are simple words, primordially there. And this is the basis of all the others. And it just takes time. So as Sunny said, I knew I had a choice. When she was in her cell, working with herself on all this insanity and trying to deal with the craziness of her life, she said, I'd give myself 5 minutes to be angry. Then I'd stop. She had yoga. She'd had yoga. For years living in a cell, isolated, you know. It was a Bible they gave her, some kind of the Bible or something. She had her own mind only. That was her only resource. And her yoga. Changing her mind, working on her mind, knowing that she was the beneficiary of this work. It wasn't moralistic. I'm being a good girl. I'm not being angry. Not like that. So we have two main modes in our culture. We vomit it all out, or we deny. We live in denial, and that's reasonable. Because if when so much trauma happens, so much suffering happens, literally it's too hard to bear. That's why we put it away. We don't know. We're not equipped to deal with it because the attachment is so intense. And the aversion is so outrageous. Of course, it's extremely hard to deal with these things. When you take the view of karma, we're not all just a blank slate to begin with the same, you know. We bring our own stuff with us. Some children can have appalling parents. We know this. We know from our analysis, we can't work it out. Because they're better equipped internally from their own past, they handle it better. Others can have nice parents who'd be like complete psychopaths. We can't work this out, you know. And that's what I think we don't do, may I say this, perhaps I'm wrong, in our modern psychological models. We don't factor in what the mind of the person themselves. As soon as we see, you know, when we're dealing with, say there's a child, and we see them shouting, angry, upset, the first place we look is their parents. What have they done to them? The Buddhist approach is, they might be lousy parents. Your boyfriend might have hit you, but the Buddhist skill is to look at this one right there, this one right there. When you study the mind in Buddhism, you don't discuss the events that cause it, you discuss the mind itself. It's so direct, it's shocking. I'm not used to this. It's not so much a psychological model as a neuroscientific model, looking at the brain, what piece does what. That's the Buddhist one, except we're not looking at the brain. We're looking at the actual subjective, non-physical, subjective, cognitive process itself. And the thing that really is surprising us, when we get to see the mind, we get to see this, but because we're only familiar with the emotional component, when the body's affected, and as we drill down deeper as a vessel practice every day, we get to hear that all these states of mind are conceptual stories. They are conceptual stories. Attachment is a detailed conceptual story. As I said, at the level of an assumption that I only can get the nice things. And anger is this detailed conceptual story that says, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's what anger believes and feels and is expressed. So whether that's as depression, it's still this kind of I-based experience of hopelessness and dark and nothing, you know. We have to hear these conceptual stories rooted beneath these emotions. Emotions are the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. Buddha is your best cognitive therapist in the universe. And it's the hardest job we'll ever do. But that's the job to be done. That's being a Buddhist. Wearing these robes is not being a Buddhist. Saying mantras is not being a Buddhist. Taking refuge is not being a Buddhist. Looking holy is not being a Buddhist. This is the job of being a Buddhist. When we do this, everything else we do supports that job. That's the point. And this is the solution to our suffering. Because suffering is the consequence of attachment and aversion and the other dramas. Suffering is directly coming from those states of mind. This is the part that's shocking for us. It doesn't mean the boyfriend didn't punch you. It doesn't mean that you weren't tortured. You were. And Buddha's got his answer for why they happen as well, which is karma. And the good things as well. We never ask why the good things happen. We only ask why the bad things happen. Any questions, people? Any questions? Any comments, questions, anything you want, please?
Is it possible can you repeat the example that you gave, because we lost you when you were explaining that about the
Example you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. Sorry, darling. When roughly was it what you missed?
About the post-traumatic feelings that you get about when there's a situation that you suffer.
What, darling? Say it again. Say it again. What? Give me a clue. Sorry. Say it again. What?
You were talking about an example, how to deal with the situation instead of getting the post-traumatic feelings about that event.
Yeah, if we use the simple example of a simple example of attachment not getting what it wants, are we communicating? So you can have a terrible example of attachment not getting what it wants when your father beats you up, let's say. That's quite an intense experience, isn't it? Are you with me? Can you hear my point? So the attachment there will be very shocked, and then the aversion or the anger or the despair or the depression will be very intense. And therefore, depending on your ability, you'd either hide it, you'd push it away, depending on how much fear you've got, or you'd be angry. You'd have a whole bunch of different responses according to your personality. And then if you have lots of those experiences, they build up and build up and build up, don't they? And then we have there's so much trauma in our life. Sometimes it has to come to the surface because nothing goes astray. So that's a typical example of when we suffer because we don't know how to deal with it at the time. And indeed, it would be very difficult to deal with unless you're mentally equipped. So now, where do we start with that? You don't wait for a traumatic, terrible thing to happen again. You look at your mind and look at the simple examples of ordinary daily life. When you break the cup while you're doing the dishes, when the red light comes, the baby events, the tiny, tiny baby events of when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Are you communicating with me? So there you can manage those. But we usually just let it fester. You're angry at the red light and you're cursing, you're swearing, and then the green light comes. So you didn't deal with that anger, did you? Are you seeing my point? You didn't deal with the anger. So dealing with it means arguing with it. Can you hear that or not? Can you hear that? So in other words, the simple event of the red light, you're sitting there frustrated, angry. So what you do, because that's attachment, not getting what it wants. So you deal with it. And then you say to yourself, relax, Robina, it's only a red light. It's not too bad. You can handle it. That little tiny argument calms the anger. So therefore there's nothing to carry on. You deal with it. So you left it behind. Are you with me? Can you hear that technically? If you do that every day, you'd never get to the point where you'd have a serious, horrible, because you're able to deal with things as they come and you get more and more equipped. And then when the really bad things come, you're more able to handle it. That's exactly what the woman called Sunny did in her prison cell every single day in this unbelievable nightmare of being accused of murdering 2 policemen, of her husband being executed, her children gone, and no one believing that she was innocent. You'd go mad, wouldn't you? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So she learned to say, I knew I had a choice. I could learn to change the way my mind is seeing all this. So she came out of prison. She's not traumatized. She dealt with them moment by moment by moment. Are we communicating? It's hard because when the bad thing happens, it's so absolute for us. It's so concrete. It's so concrete and solid. And we don't think it's got anything to do with our interpretation. We just assume it is bad. He is wrong. It shouldn't have happened. We don't even think we have a viewpoint. But anger is a viewpoint. Attachment is a viewpoint. This is what's shocking to see. We just think it's just the way it is because it's so automatic in us. Are we communicating? Do you think? Sincerely, are we communicating? Lou. All right, darling. Hello, Cara. Yes, talk to me.
Hi, hello, Venerable. It's nice to see you. You said depression is when you get like it's an accumulation of attachment, not getting, and you're internalizing. So how do you break the spell? I mean, I know we're doing it, but is it sort of, yeah, how do you break that spell? How do you break the
what I'm saying by
visceral tug of it?
By doing what I'm saying. But the point
challenging yourself over and over.
Yeah, all the time, adjusting your thoughts. Your attachment just is energized to getting the nice piece of cake. You get to the cupboard, it's the wrong cake. Your sister ate the last piece. You get annoyed. And then you just, because it's only small, you don't deal with it. So it stays inside. And then another event happens. And then more tomorrow. And then more tomorrow. And we're like little we're like puppets on a string, dragged by attachment and aversion. We've got to start arguing, reinterpreting the experiences. That's the point. But the thing is, attachment's so primordial. It's not really till we realized emptiness that we're going to get rid of it. So we shouldn't hold our breath and think by doing this, we're suddenly going to, it's so primordially deep. These are deep, primordially deep levels of my, and it's going to be dealing with it every day. But another one is, because this is ancient history from a long time and the habits are very deep, we've got to learn to live with these things. We've got to learn to live with them. And the key one is not to believe so strongly that these are the absolute truth. So there's multiple ways of dealing with things here, not just what I'm saying. Because these habits are so deep, the assumptions are so deep, the consequences of all these are so deep, and the karma of them. It's learning to take them, a bit, in one sense, is like learning to take them less seriously, because they're so utter, they're so complete for us, so absolute truth for us. So loosening the grip a little bit. As the Lamas say, not believing so strongly in these stories. That's a big skill we have to learn too. And learning to live with it. It's like you have a pain in the knee, you've just got to learn to live with it sometimes. So the same with moments of depression will come, and moments of annoyance or moments of jealousy, and they seem to come out of nowhere. Just let them come and then let them go. Don't grab hold of them and drive into them and go crazy. And just learn to let them come and let them go. Because there's so much stuff happening, And the way karma talks, we've got so much buried deep in our minds, it's hard to deal with. But I'm talking about a day-to-day approach of noticing the thoughts, noticing the attachment, noticing the interpretation of attachment and anger, and arguing with them, kind of adjusting them. That's what Sunny was doing in her cell on her own in this nightmarish situation. I knew I had the choice, she said. Well, she meant to change her thoughts, change her interpretation, not lose her mind. This is incredible. It's incredibly amazing. I admire this woman incredibly. She had incredible, for me, it's emotional intelligence, No one taught her. She wasn't Buddhist. She just had this ability, extraordinary ability. Are we understanding, people?
Mm.
Are there any questions, people? Yes, Bonnie.
I'm not, I don't know how you can see interpretation of this.
Have a mic, darling.
What?
Yes, go on, Anne. Say it again.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how you change.
A bit closer so they can hear you.
How do you interpret the stories differently?
So give an example. Can you give an example?
Well, like the one you gave, let's say your boyfriend, it just says breaks up with
Is what? Breaks up with you, rejects you.
you, so you go into depression.
That's right.
So how do you
Change that.
interpret that story?
How do you change? So, okay, the first thing to notice, and this is what's hard, and all this is so spontaneous. So forget about the depression. It might be depression, or it might be jealousy. It might be rage. It might be anger. It might be resentment. It might be, I must be a complete creep. If he leaves me, I must be horrible. And you have this low self-esteem. We have all those emotions, right? But we notice them as emotions. But those emotions, which is when the body is experienced, we feel it in our body. But beneath that, they are actually interpretations. They're actually conceptual interpretations, but we don't notice them because they're so spontaneous. And then they feed into and then affect our body, and that's only when we notice them. So anger, that's why I'm saying using a simple example of when you break the cup doing the dishes. It's a tiny example. You start with that one. Can you see how you can change that interpretation? Can you see, let's say you break your nice cup, or you break Margaret's cup, and immediately you get guilty. You get my point now? You understand my point? Can you catch that thought and go, it's okay, Anne, I'm just a human being, it's all right, and I can tell Margaret, I'll buy her a new one. And you solve it at that moment, instead of buying into that guilt and then hiding it and feeling all neurotic. Are you hearing my point?
Right.
That is a simple example. Can you imagine how you can do that?
I can.
Well, then all we're talking is that, but for the bad things as well, like the friend, the woman on death row in this nightmare of bad things happening, accused of murder, she was innocent, husband being executed, all these, forget about the boyfriend just leaving you. She was able to see the crazy, able to work with her mind every day and not be angry and not get depressed. That's the point. But you don't wait 6 years to do it. You begin with it then. And this is why it's so hard. Theoretically, can you hear it? The sooner you catch it, depression is already something that is the result of a long time not dealing. Because one day you just can't get out of bed anymore because now you're just inert. Because the stories have been going on so deep in our mind, but we just can't hear the stories. But what the stories are saying is, I'm hopeless, I'm no good, how dare he leave me, it's not fair, I'm really a nice person, what did I do wrong? The whole day, every day that these stories happening, all these arguments with yourself, and they're all self-hating arguments, they're hopeless, they're angry, they're depressed, they're jealous, unhappy, resentful, I'm no good. No wonder you want to kill yourself.
It's when you hear that, those
Stories.
like I'm no good.
Yeah, you
That's
argue
when
with
you
them.
have to adjust
Yes,
it.
you argue with them. Yes, you try to adjust it. It's sort of like, I think of all these thoughts are in my roommates. And you've got a bunch of good, intelligent, kind, reasonable roommates, kindness, self-respect, forgiveness. And you've got the angry, unhappy, jealous, resentful, depressed roommates. Well, your good roommates have got to argue with your rubbish ones. That's a way of putting it. We talk to ourselves all the time, but we're mostly not aware of the conversation because we run to the negative one. We run to the self-hating one. We run to the one that I'm no good and I'm hopeless. That's automatic. It's the irony of ego. So we've got to change those stories. You with me? You with me? But it's every second. And the thing is, if we get better and better and better, and we get better and better, we can catch them more quickly. Because the fundamental thing behind all this, the Buddha's view is, we've all got incredible potential. We've all got good qualities, and our good qualities can grow, and our negative qualities are there, but they're not set in stone, and we can diminish them. And this is the job of day to day. So it's like you're building yourself up into a healthy, self-respectful, happy human being. And it's to do with your mind and how you see and think things. So it's an intense job because the tendency is to believe the boyfriend, some people could be just enraged and angry and want to kill him. Depends on your personality, you know. You understand? Not everybody gets depressed. I wouldn't have got depressed. I'd be angry. And you want to kill the boyfriend. That's volatile aversion. Depression is more subtle aversion. It goes against oneself. They're all, because they're also automatic for us now, that we just don't notice them until the body feels it, and then we know something's happening. But it's kind of late, it's too late. That's why when we really can do the job that the Buddha is saying we can do, get really good concentration, really subtle, every second we're able to see the thoughts. That's advanced. We can head towards that. Do you understand? Yeah, and
It's a lot more clear.
good, darling. I'm very happy. Thank you. But it takes masses of practice. You know, it takes masses of practice. What else, people? Yes. Hello. Hello. Good. 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 Happy to see you. Speak a bit louder for the people, darling.
Yeah, so I had a question sort of talking about the observation of the feelings in the body and how that's more of the part of the process of observation. If you had, I want to put it as like a double point arrow, like observing the emotions as they're happening in the body while observing what is triggering them outside. And the thing you mentioned, so I thought that was interesting. That's something I can sometimes do. Then you mentioned something about how beyond the emotions.
Yeah, right,
there
exactly.
exists a conceptual framework.
This is what I'm talking about. See,
And so
yeah.
my question is regarding that is like, can one approximate that conceptual framework, not from discursive thought, but through the emotion in the body?
I think, you know, this is where we're all very different. We have very many different ways of approaching. And this one, and this is certainly one of the Buddhist techniques of learning to notice these sensations in the body and paying attention. That's a very strong one for many people. But I'll tell you, it's absolutely not what I do. I wouldn't even know how to do that. For me, the approach is, I can see, let's say with anger, your body's involved, your body's shouting and yelling, isn't it? I mean, you can see the expression of anger. So for me, it's the process of understanding intellectually this model and then observing the thoughts that are what anger is expressing. So the body, when it's at the level of the body, that is the grossest level. So it's a good start to start at that one. But that wasn't whatever I could do. I wouldn't even notice the effects in my body. There's a different, this approach, which I prefer, is hearing this conceptual presentation of the mind and then learning to understand what attachment and anger are, and then beginning to hear in my mind as I'm feeling the anger, to hear the words that anger is saying. How dare you do that to me? It is not fair. I did not deserve that. We have to hear those words.
So you just said you understand the conceptual
Yes.
framework, but then you said you feel the emotion in your body.
Well, when I notice that I'm angry and agitated, then I hear beneath that, because I understand what anger is, I hear myself saying, literally saying, even if I'm shouting at a person, I'm expressing exactly what anger feels. How dare you do that to me? I'll say it. That is literally the conceptual story of anger. Can you hear my point?
Somewhat.
Oh.
I can hear you clear, but I don't think I have that understanding.
No, I understand. So that's where, when you study Buddhist psychological model, you learn the definitions of these states of mind. They're very precise. And it literally says, anger is a conceptual thought that exaggerates the badness of something. Attachment is a conceptual thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of something. That's the bare bones concept. And then from countless lifetimes of practicing it, it's this emotional, physical component. So we've got to drill down beneath the physical, beyond that, which is where we get good concentration and meditation, and we can hear that actual conceptual story and argue with it. You with me?
Yeah, there I'm more with you.
Good.
And also, you mentioned another thing, and I'll be brief, but you mentioned the relationship between fear
Yes.
and the other emotions.
Yes.
I thought that was so
I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? If we
Yeah.
notice that, it's right. Fear is the character of all the neuroses.
And you mentioned its relationship to attachment, and then that got me thinking about, you mentioned the primordial attachment. And I was wondering if you had to thought come across your head, I'm sure you probably have about how maybe we're just terrified that there is no self.
Well, that's the interesting point. When you start to get a taste of emptiness, a taste of there's no inherent I, the first response is incredible fear, in which he says, but he says not to go into it because there's nothing to be afraid of. You'll never disappear. It's a good sign, though, if you can handle it. It's a good sign. And that is it. It's a fear built because it's like fear built up from countless lifetimes of believing in things that don't exist. So that $50 note is not 500, but we're so convinced it's 500 for eons that it looks like 500. You believe it's 500. You expect 500's worth. You can only be disappointed when you get 50's worth. But that sort of like the memory of all that, but we forget it. Something like that. I mean, it's fascinating to hear that fear is beneath all the delusions. And when we have realized emptiness, we are only joyful. We are only blissful. We are only loving and kind. This is amazing to think. Fear has gone. There is no fear. Yes, I'm going to look forward to it. Yeah, people. Some other questions, darlings. Yes. Nobody else. Over here. Well, here we are. Graciela. Thank you, darling.
How do you deal with someone who's angry?
Someone else's anger.
Someone,
Well, so what do you mean by deal? Where's the problem?
how do you relate healthily? How to relate healthily in a healthy way?
Okay, you first got to analyze what's going on in your mind. So whether it's a red light, someone accusing you of murdering 2 policemen, your husband beating you up, or someone shouting at you, that's an external event. You agree? That's the external event. So it's good to see what it is. You might as well locate it accurately. Now, what's going on in your mind? So what are the names of the delusions in your mind? This is the whole point. Well, I'll tell you. The attachment in you, like everybody, only wants the person to be nice to me. And then when they are being angry, we're thinking, how dare they be angry at me? So that's your anger. And then if you're scared of that person, if that person's like you're a child and it's your daddy and he's shouting, then the anger is there. The attachment's not getting what it wants. You have a panic attack. The aversion is there and you're freaking out. That's what it is. So that's what your mind. So we have to learn to see those. So as we work on our mind, someone else's anger won't worry us. Get out of their way. They might be crazy. Yes, leave this crazy person. So we've got to work on our own mind. Are you with me? And why someone else's anger upsets me is because I am angry with their anger. That's very simple. Huh?
Well,
Well,
I'd like to have a good relationship with this angry person.
well, okay, so
And I
wait a
guess-
minute, stop. Is this person a stranger, your husband, your child?
Family.
A family? We'll leave it like that. So you want, so then, okay, they're angry, right? Are they angry with you or just angry in general?
In general.
Okay,
In general.
so are you afraid of their anger?
Probably.
Probably. And you want to have a good relationship. Well, what's stopping you from having a good relationship with them? You show them your love, your affection. You show, well then, what more can you do? You can't do more. Don't, you know, attachment, your attachment. This is where it's really hard, Graciela. We don't talk like this in our psychological models. The Buddha's got this distinct delusions and virtues. There are delusions and virtues, and they're mixed together like a big soup. So the virtuous part of you, called compassion, wants to have a relationship with this person. The attachment part of you pollutes your compassion and drags it down because it makes us all messy, you know. So the part that's blocking, preventing you from doing whatever's necessary to make that happen is your attachment and your own aversion and your own fears and your own whatever it is. So they're the mess, they're the problem. Work on those. And then you do what you can to love this person and be compassionate. But you can't, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Maybe they're so angry that nothing will change them. So you do your best and have no expectation and love them for who they are. What do you think? See, attachment wants to change everything to make it what I want. And we think it sounds so noble, you know, but it's not sometimes. It's just sticking our nose in where it doesn't belong. Do you understand? What else do you think? Mm-hmm.
Here, the Zoom viewers, we have a
Good, okay, then talk to me.
Okay, Chari, go ahead.
Hello, Shari, darling.
I have a question. What about when we don't show anger, or it doesn't manifest as anger, but it could manifest in a health related aspect, which a lot of us don't outwardly yell or react. I'm not a reactive person, but I'm sure it manifests internally, which
Right.
ultimately is probably worse because you're holding it in, or you just
Well,
don't.
in one way, it's worse for you, but in the end, really, whether you're angry or whether you keep it inside, both harm the individual. But at least you don't harm the other person, which is a good thing.
So
So,
how?
okay, this is the point. If we recognize that the driving force is this constant yearning for everything to be lovely, can you get that?
Yeah.
The attachment, can you get that? Can you hear that?
Yes.
And that's the neurotic one. It's a sort of emotional hunger, a neediness that things, everything be lovely, everything be nice. The millisecond you meet a thing, a sound, a smell, a person that does a bad thing, then your aversion will arise. Okay. Now that if a person is volatile, they'll shout. If you're not volatile, you won't express it. So of course, everything every one of us thinks, forget about even saying and doing, does program our mind. And if you take the Vajrayana model of the way we're constructed, and this is the same model as the Tibetan medical system, similar to the Chinese one, our subtle physical energy, we've got these 72,000 subtle channels coursing through all of our body, and through those channels are this subtle wind energy, which is the basis of our health. And connected to all those different wind energies are our different states of mind. So as Lama Zopa says, even just having an angry thought already programs your mind with more anger. And second, pollutes those wind energies, which eventually is what causes ill health, this life and future life. So of course it affects us. Everything we think and do and say affects us mentally and physically. Yes. So instead of, we either think we have to vomit it all out or suppress. But what we're talking here is not suppressing, but noticing the aversion when it arises and doing that little argument with it. Well, it's okay. This is my crazy boyfriend. It's just how he is. Don't worry about it, Shari. And you deal with it. Your positive roommate argues with your scary roommate. And then you solve the problem and you stop the anger growing. This is the point. You with me?
Yeah. Not as much anger. I think it's sometimes an inability to help somebody that could cause irrational emotions, probably.
Let's analyze that. Well, that's a whole different discussion. So what, you have to give me an example, darling.
An elderly mother who's ill, who's at, last stages of life. So, it's very hard. You can't help. There's nothing, I can't provide for her at this stage of life.
Right. It's the same analysis, Shari. Attachment in us, which is this constant unhappy hunger that everything be lovely. So whether it's the boyfriend shouting at you or whether it's your old mother being sick and you can't make it better, your attachment gets distressed and then aversion or hopelessness arises. That's what I'm talking about. So that's where we've got to be realistic. You can't make your old mummy better, but you can love her and take care of her and be supportive. And in that way, it doesn't become internalized frustration and hopelessness. You make it more positive. When we accept the reality that we can't make her suddenly turn back 20 years or suddenly get better, we have to face it. So attachment can't stand these unhappy situations. So aversion is what will arise. So you have to counteract that aversion by saying, this is reality. It's how it is. It's okay, Shari. And then you love her and do what you can for her. It doesn't become internalized upset and frustration. Do you understand? It's facing reality. Facing reality is really the key to success. Facing reality means this is what's happening. If I can change it, great. If I can't, then it's okay. And you do what you can to be loving and kind. You don't suppress it and make it tight. You understand?
Yes, loving and kind can be sometimes difficult when the person is trying or sets up obstacles in whatever scenario. If you're not, you give, and a person, it's you don't do it to expect, but when you're hit against the wall.
Exactly, Shari. I understand. And again, so that situation. So this is where, again, it's really hard to distinguish. There within us, all of us, this is the part of us that's unhappy, there's this attachment and this neediness to be seen and loved and appreciated. And if your poor old mummy can't give that, then that part of us gets hurt and upset. That's because of attachment. So we have to give up that expectation that your mummy's going to tell you you're a lovely girl and thank you for being nice. She may be, we've got to learn to accept that she's not capable and still love her in the best way we can and learn to, almost like we say in our own culture, not take it personally. But it's very hard because we suffer. The deepest attachment, Shari, is for being seen and heard and approved of. And if you can't get that, that's very distressing. That's the deepest attachment. So learning to accept that she can't give it and love her nevertheless. And, because attachment wants it to be nice. We assume, and this is part of the problem, if we're trying to love our old mother, but she's not capable of thanking and being grateful, we feel we didn't succeed, but you did succeed. You did everything you can. So don't judge your success on your mother's response. Then you just go crazy. You get.
Got it.
Yeah. Time to go home. Look, 7:30, 8:30, gone like a dream. Can't believe it. Like 1 second we arrived. Now it's time to go home. Before you know it, we'll be dead. Okay, so get ready for death, everybody. Any more questions before we finish? Before I leave you, I'm going to leave you, not tomorrow. I'm going to Margaret and Anne are taking me out for dinner tomorrow. And then I'm going to leave on Friday. And who's going to take me to the airport? Who was it? Jack. Okay. That's it. I'll see you next time. Don't know when and where, but we'll make it happen. Won't we? So maybe we should offer a man river just to sort of thank the Buddhas for the teachings for the last 2 weeks. What do you think?
Yeah.
Should we do that? Yeah. What do you think?
Nothing about.
Port Patchy. There we go. So yeah, so we're going to just thinking it's a very nice ritual, really. It's very nice. We're going to think of this offering all the marvelous things of the world and think of offering to the Buddha. Okay, I've been doing all the talking, blah, blah. But imagine I'm just a mouthpiece for the Buddha, okay? And we thank the Buddha for all the teachings and we think, and I've got benefit myself by talking this stuff, I promise you. So we're so grateful to hear all the teachings, try and hear the meaning, take this as tools, we can develop our marvelous potential so we can be a benefit to others and do the wishes of all the holy beings and keep growing and keep blah, 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 blah. That's it. Okay. So this thing that looks like, I always love this 10-pin bowling thing. It actually represents the universe. You'd never know it, but it does. Okay, who's going to sing it? Shall I sing it? Saji perki jugshing metog tram ri rab lingji ni degen padi sangye jingdu mig te ulwagi. Now we're offering representations of enlightened body. So we achieve it. Now I've forgotten the words. Saji perki jugshing metog tram ri rab lingji ni degen padi sangye jingdu mig te ulwagi drokon nam dag jingla chapa shog. Representations of body, speech, and mind. So we achieve enlightened body, speech, and mind. That's it. And that's it. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata Yami. May all the Buddhas happily receive our offering. Thank you, Graciela. Thank you, dearest.
Thank you
Kind
so much.
And thank you, dearest Patty. Thank you, everybody. All you people. Thank you, everybody.
And we offer kata for you, Venerable.
Thank you, precious. I receive
Thank
it.
you, Venerable Robina, for wonderful, wonderful
So happy.
2 weeks of teachings. Amazing. Thank you.
All right, darlings. Much love, everybody. See you next time. Or somewhere else on Zoom, somewhere on the planet with this amazing Zoom thing. Okay. Much love. Bye, darlings.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.